My name is Tony Gachoka. My Twitter handle is at Tony Gachoka. I'm making a personal, public, and very important statement on the state of corruption in the Republic of Kenya. I'm making this statement here in Nairobi on Sunday the 15th, March 2015. I want to start by talking about the cancer of corruption and how it has destroyed so many countries in the world, and in specific terms in the African continent. You are well aware that public service has become a route to self-enrichment and has become a source of public outrage. The reason it is impoverishing our people, destroying the institutions of government, and destroying the credibility of public service. In Kenya, we have numerous corruption scandals beginning in the early 60s, when the country began to see the coming of corruption in what was called land for jobs, land for patronage, land for politics scandals under the Kenyatta regime. At the time, we came to learn of political patronage, where political jobs were given as a way of inducing tribal and political support. And during that era, many people entered the civil service and public life who would never have otherwise seen or been able to hold the offices they occupied. Then came the Moi regime, under which patronage was turned into direct, straightforward public corruption. The likes of Kuria Kanyingi and Saitoti and Biwott were seen carrying millions of shillings to presidential harambees, openly showing the public a display of wealth that was unaccounted for. Billionaires and millionaires entered politics. It became a refuge for everyone to seek to be elected in order to protect and enhance public wealth. In all the corruption scandals that we've seen, Takwa, Gorge, so many others have been so difficult for Kenya, namely the Anglo Leasing scandal that showed the looting of more than 1 billion of public money, $1 billion. In that scheme, the perpetrator, Kamlesh Patni, remains a free man. All the people implicated by several public accounts committees, judicial reviews, all of them remain unaccounted for. We have had so many casualties of Goldenberg. We've had judges removed from the bench. We've had small civil servants lose their jobs. But in all this fiasco, nobody has ever been arrested, charged, and prosecuted successfully for Goldenberg. In fact, Goldenberg became a baggie of goodies. Every time Kamlesh Patni was in trouble, he gave something away. He gave what was never his away. He gave the Grand Regency, it was never his, away. He gave political deals of money that he looted by saying he has no claim against the state, yet everybody knows that everything he obtained was obtained by fraud and corruption. The so-called radical surgery of the judiciary in Kenya that was meant to be the new promise of a new dawn to hold to account public officials was never going to see the light of day. In fact, during the radical surgery under then Minister of Justice Keraito Murungi consumed him himself when he became embroiled in corruption at a personal level. I will be coming shortly to Anglo Leasing. But after that, we then went into the clamor for a new constitution. This new constitution came with the promise of a new dawn, the zero tolerance for corruption promised Mwai Kibaki in his campaign elections of 2002. The early days of the Kibaki administration saw the removal from high office of no other than his PS in charge of ethics and corruption, John Githongo, followed shortly by his personal assistant, Alfred Gitonga, Christopher Murungaro, the Minister for Internal Security, the Minister for Justice, Keraito Murungi, Minister for Finance, Mwiraria, and so many others saw the door, all of whom were shown the door, including the suspension of Honorable George Saitoti and Honorable former Minister for Finance, Amos Kemunya, who said, "I'd rather die than resign." All these have been people who have been hand in hand, implicated in serious issues of corruption. Now, this scandal of the greatest scandal of our time, Anglo Leasing, was first unearthed in Kenya in the year 2007. But now, 7 years later, Anglo Leasing seems to be the thing that may consume the presidency of Honorable Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, the President of the Republic of Kenya. This scandal, which began as a loose association of 18 ghost companies, would see the consumption of money from the public coffers exceed even Goldenberg 5 times over. Anglo Leasing was born in the early years of KANU under the presidency of retired President Moi. It was to grow in stature and was inherited by the administration of Mwai Kibaki and the highest people in his government. In fact, in the taped conversation between John Githongo and the former Minister for Justice, Kiraito Murungi, Kiraito said, and I quote, that this man, Arura Pereira, was a major helper of Baba. Our president was supported by him even when in hospital. So Mr. Githongo, please go slow on Mr. Arura Pereira. Arura Pereira was last year paid by the Republic of Kenya upon an order of foreign courts 1.4 billion shillings in compensation for goods and services that were never delivered to the Republic. The Parliamentary Accounts Committee, the parliamentary committees related to this matter were to be further shocked when Deputy Solicitor General Muthoni Kimani came days after this illegal payment, which, by the way, was never sanctioned by the President as required in the Constitution under Section 35, but was paid by Thuge PS Finance without express and legal authority of the President. Before even the dust had settled, Parliament was told there is another claim of 3.05 billion by Arura Pereira that was soon to hit the Kenyan media. After that, everybody is now aware that the President did direct the investigations by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Authority on the matter of Anglo Leasing, expecting the matter to move expeditiously. Just like they have behaved before, the ghosts of corruption were to reawaken in Kenya in a manner and a way unseen since Kenya gained her independence from England in 1963. This time round, the anti-corruption body itself became consumed it became the hunted when it was the hunter. The anti-graft body was dogged by allegations of internal interference and disappearance on files specifically touching with the Anglo Leasing scandal. What concerns me as Tony Gachoka and as a man who holds my fidelity to the law, to the Constitution, and to this country called Kenya, is because the investigators, the Director of Public Prosecution, Parliament, and all the agencies of government have refused and are afraid to name the ghosts of Anglo Leasing. I want to be very, very clear and categoric because when I have been on national television, there have been restrictions of the laws of libel and defamation. I'm well aware of all my personal exposure to any suit that may be brought by any person to me. For ease of reference for any suit that will follow this statement, I wish to say I'm available Tony Gachoka, P.O. Box 50705 00200 Nairobi, Kenya. My Twitter handle is @Tony Gachoka. And I wish to say today, in no unequivocal terms, the political person behind the Anglo Leasing scandal that has lost Kenya more than $5 billion is a man by the name James Bond. James Bond is a code name that was told to me by Mr. Jimmy Wanjigi. Mr. Jimmy Wanjigi is a businessman in Nairobi who fronts his businesses by a company called Kwacha Holdings Limited, which was a company he inherited from his family. Mr. Wanjigi began his early business when he was stationed at Harambee Plaza here in Nairobi in the early years. Mr. Wanjigi was then to form political and business relationships and partnerships with the then Director of Intelligence, Brigadier Boynet, through an extortion ring around what was known as the Asian Mafia in Kenya, including specifically those who were called the G7, namely Havinder Sethi, people like Havinder Sethi, people like the late Sunil Bihal, and many others. They began an extortion ring, which was to be able to bring into enrichment Mr. James Bond and Jimmy Wanjigi on two fronts. One, money was paid for silence and protection, but on the second hand, information was gathered for blackmail. That money and that information for blackmail was to be handed over by Jimmy Wanjigi to the then Vice President, George Saitoti. George Saitoti, a political ally of Jimmy Wanjigi, was to become his new political godfather for more than 1 decade. And during that period, George Saitoti, accused as the chief architect of Goldenberg, was able to get away with the accusations of Goldenberg. But he did not get into Anglo Leasing himself. What he did was provide the political cover for Mr. Wanjigi. Many casualties in this country have feared to name this man. This man has never been seen in KANU politics of the past. He was seen as he was a Saitoti ally. After the death of Saitoti, he mysteriously entered to the Jubilee political alliance politics. And as a consequence, he has exposed the president and the deputy president and the entire Jubilee government to ridicule and, in fact, to intense public scrutiny over the will to fight corruption. So it must be said here and this day and today that I have said, and I'm willing to appear in any fora, that during the tenure of his uncle as PS in the Treasury, Magari, Mr. Wanjigi was able to orchestrate and put together a web of political and financial conspiracy that included the Kamani brothers and Kamani family and people like Arura Pereira, together with political godfathers, to create what we now know as the Anglo Leasing ghosts and the Anglo Leasing scandals. I can no longer remain silent as the anti-corruption graft body in Kenya self-destructs and disintegrates in internal wars funded by the monies of corruption. Secondly, as Parliament, our watchdog of the people itself, is consumed by allegations of internal corruption and will be unable, in fact, not credible enough to be able to have the importance of public confidence in trying to address this menace. I stand here because I know that the President of Kenya is committed to the fight against corruption. But the President of Kenya has a very short window where he must remove all and everybody. He must have no friend. He must have no aid. He must have nobody next to him who is thinking at all with this menace that will destroy and consume our country. The President must leave the talk and must clean this government so that men and women who are committed and who will earn the public trust can do what should have been done so many years ago. So I end this broadcast, I want to say this: the immortal words of Martin Luther King remain with every Kenyan, that the arc of history may be long, but it always bends towards justice. Corruption will never defeat Kenya. Kenya must and will defeat corruption, even if that means taking on James Bond, Jimmy Wanjigi.